Folks, let me tell you, nobody knows wheat better than me. I've seen the best wheat, the greatest wheat, believe me. American wheat was supposed to be number one. It was supposed to win everywhere, but now it's getting rejected. Total disaster, very unfair, and I'll say it again. Very, very unfair.
Now, here's the story. U.S. wheat shipments, once considered the backbone of global food trade, are being rejected across major markets. And while America struggles to find buyers, Brazil has quietly stepped in, not only filling the gap, but landing premium grain deals worth more than $5 billion. This is not a small shift. This is a tectonic one. A story of rejection, realignment, and resilience in global trade. For decades, the United States was the undisputed wheat powerhouse. It supplied nations from Asia to Africa, with American farmers boasting high yields, modern technology, and government-backed trade agreements. Wheat wasn't just a crop, it was a symbol of American dominance in the global food economy. But the problem with dominance is that it breeds complacency. Over the past decade, the U.S. has faced rising competition from regions that were once considered secondary players. Countries like Brazil, Russia, and even Argentina have been modernizing their farming practices, improving logistics, and expanding their export markets. And slowly, they have chipped away at America's wheat supremacy. The most recent blow came when multiple international buyers, particularly in Asia and the Middle East, started rejecting U.S. wheat shipments. Officially, the reasons vary. Some cite quality issues, others point to pricing disputes, and a few mention political instability in supply chains. But beneath the surface, the real story is much bigger. Buyers are turning away from U.S. wheat not because it's unavailable, but because it's becoming less competitive compared to alternatives. Brazil, with its fertile soils and massive agricultural investments, has been preparing for this moment for years. Let's break down how this unfolded. For American farmers, 2024 was supposed to be a recovery year. After facing droughts in the Midwest and supply chain hiccups during the pandemic, production was stabilizing. The government projected strong export numbers, and shipping companies were gearing up for steady demand. But then came a wave of rejections. Shipments headed for major buyers like Egypt, Indonesia, and even Mexico were turned away or renegotiated at steep discounts. Some officials pointed to pesticide residue concerns, while others claimed that American wheat was failing to meet evolving standards of milling quality. Regardless of the official explanations, the result was the same: lost contracts, idle ships, and angry farmers. Enter Brazil. For years, Brazilian agribusiness has been investing heavily in its wheat sector. Traditionally known for soybeans, sugar, and beef, Brazil has expanded its grain belt into regions once considered too marginal for large-scale wheat farming. With better irrigation systems, modern crop science, and favorable weather patterns, Brazil has suddenly become a credible alternative supplier, and in global trade, timing is everything. As U.S. shipments were being rejected, Brazil was right there with a premium product, competitive prices, and an eager government pushing for new trade deals. Within months, Brazil secured contracts worth over $5 billion, becoming not just a replacement, but in some cases, the preferred supplier. For the U.S., this rejection is not just a matter of pride, it's a matter of economics. Wheat exports account for billions in revenue, and for many rural states, they are a lifeline. Farmers who had already invested in planting, harvesting, and preparing shipments suddenly find themselves holding unsold stock. Grain silos are filling up, prices are dropping, and many fear that without immediate buyers, they could face devastating losses. The political ripple effect is equally strong. Lawmakers from wheat-producing states are pressuring Washington to act, demanding investigations, subsidies, or new trade negotiations. But global buyers are not waiting for American politics to settle. They are moving on. The impact goes beyond farmers. Shipping companies that rely on steady wheat exports are seeing contracts canceled. Ports that handle agricultural shipments are reporting declines in volume. Even the insurance sector, which underwrites large commodity deals, is reassessing the risk of U.S. wheat being stranded at sea or rejected upon arrival. It's a chain reaction. One rejection leads to another, and soon the perception builds that U.S. wheat is a troubled product. In international markets, perception can be just as damaging as reality. Meanwhile, Brazil is playing this moment to perfection. Not only are they securing deals, but they're branding their wheat as a premium product. Brazilian officials emphasize sustainability, modern farming techniques, and reliability in supply. They are marketing themselves not as a temporary backup, but as a long-term partner. For countries worried about food security, especially in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, that kind of assurance is gold. And with Brazil offering competitive pricing alongside a positive narrative, the switch feels almost inevitable. Winners and losers in this story are already clear. The losers are U.S. farmers, shippers, and the broader agricultural economy that depends on wheat exports. The winners are Brazil's agribusiness giants, shipping lines that handle South American exports, and governments that negotiated these new contracts. Even financial institutions are benefiting, as they back Brazilian trade financing and see rising demand for commodity hedging tied to South American markets. But perhaps the biggest winner is geopolitics itself. Every trade shift has political implications, and this one is no different. Countries frustrated with America's use of trade as a political weapon through sanctions, tariffs, or export controls see Brazil as a neutral partner. Unlike the U.S., Brazil doesn't attach political strings to its wheat deals. That neutrality is attractive in a world where food security is becoming more important than ever, and so what started as a simple rejection of shipments could evolve into a long-term realignment of global agricultural supply chains. For Washington, the rejection stings because it comes at a time when the U.S. is already facing criticism over its trade policies. From steel to semiconductors, America has been struggling to maintain its export dominance in multiple sectors. Wheat was supposed to be different, a simple, reliable commodity where the U.S. always had the upper hand. Now, even that narrative is cracking. Some analysts warn that this is not just about wheat, but about America's declining leverage in global trade. If buyers can so easily reject U.S. wheat and find alternatives, what stops them from doing the same with other commodities? The global effect is already visible. Futures markets are adjusting, with U.S. wheat prices falling while Brazilian contracts trade at a premium. Investors are shifting portfolios, betting on Brazilian agribusiness and commodities infrastructure. Shipping routes are being redrawn, with more vessels charting courses from South American ports to Asia and Africa. And quietly, competitors like Russia and Argentina are also watching closely, hoping to carve out bigger shares of the market while America stumbles. This is not to say U.S. wheat is gone forever. The American farming machine is still massive, and its infrastructure is far more developed than Brazil's. But reputational damage can take years to repair. Once buyers lose trust in a supplier, they rarely come rushing back. And as long as Brazil keeps delivering, the incentive to return to U.S. wheat will remain weak. In the short term, American farmers face tough decisions. Do they cut production, risking long-term market share? Do they lobby harder for government subsidies and bailouts? Or do they try to adapt by investing in higher quality standards, even if that increases costs? None of these options are easy, and all of them point to one reality. The golden era of unquestioned U.S. wheat dominance may be over. And so the rejection of American wheat shipments is not just a headline, it's a warning that the global agricultural map is being redrawn, and that America, once the architect of global food supply, may now be forced to play catch-up. A warning that the global agricultural map is being redrawn, and that America, once the architect of global food supply, may now be forced to play catch-up. But what does catch-up even look like in practice? To answer that, we need to examine the structural challenges facing U.S. wheat today. First, costs. American wheat is more expensive to produce than Brazilian wheat. Land, labor, fertilizer, compliance with environmental regulations, all of these factors drive up the cost per bushel. While U.S. farmers are technologically advanced, that technology is not free. The machinery, genetically modified seeds, irrigation systems, they all come with a price tag. Brazil, on the other hand, has benefited from both natural advantages and lower operating costs. Fertile soils and favorable climates reduce the need for excessive inputs, and government subsidies have helped offset other costs. Second, logistics. Shipping wheat from the U.S. to major buyers in Asia often involves long routes across the Pacific. Brazil, by contrast, has positioned itself strategically to ship efficiently to both Europe and Africa, while also investing heavily in new port facilities and railroads that link its farming interior to the coast. Every improvement in logistics makes Brazilian wheat more attractive, not just on price but on reliability. And in a world where shipping delays can mean food shortages, reliability is king. Third, politics. Buyers are weary of American trade. Politics, sanctions, tariffs, export restrictions. These tools may serve Washington's short-term goals, but they create long-term uncertainty for importers. Nobody wants to base their food security on a supplier that could turn off the tap, for political reasons. Brazil, by contrast, has built a reputation as a neutral agricultural power. It doesn't dictate terms, it doesn't impose conditions, it simply delivers. And in trade, that consistency is a powerful selling point. So when we talk about catching up, the U.S. would need to address all three of these fronts: reduce costs, streamline logistics, and rebuild trust in its trade reliability. But doing all three simultaneously is easier said than done. Reducing costs means tackling issues that go to the heart of American agriculture, like subsidy structures and input dependency. Improving logistics means massive infrastructure investment at a time when the U.S. is already struggling with crumbling roads, bridges, and ports. And rebuilding trust means recalibrating foreign policy, which is perhaps the most difficult challenge of them all. Meanwhile, Brazil is not standing still. Flush with new revenue from its $5 billion wheat deals, the country is doubling down on investment. Agribusiness giants are expanding acreage, upgrading equipment, and negotiating even larger contracts with buyers who were once America's most loyal partners. Countries like Egypt and Indonesia, which used to rely heavily on U.S. wheat, are now signing multi-year agreements with Brazil. These deals lock in not just short-term revenue, but long-term market share. Every year that passes, America loses not just a sale, but a relationship. The winners versus losers picture is becoming more dramatic. On the ground in Brazil, farmers are experiencing a boom. Land prices in wheat-growing regions are climbing. Employment in rural communities is rising, and the government is touting this success as proof of Brazil's emergence as a global food superpower. Banks are offering favorable loans to expand production, while shipping companies are scrambling to add more vessels to meet the growing demand. Investors are pouring billions into agritech, storage, and export facilities. The energy is palpable. This is what a rising agricultural power looks like in motion. Across the ocean, the mood in America is very different. Farmers in Kansas, North Dakota, and Montana, regions long associated with wheat dominance, are struggling. With unsold stock piling up, prices dropping, and contracts evaporating, many are questioning whether they can survive another year of this uncertainty. Some are considering switching crops entirely, moving toward corn or soybeans in hopes of finding steadier markets. Others are lobbying Washington for relief packages, but there is growing fatigue over repeated bailouts. Taxpayers are asking why billions should be spent on rescuing farmers when competitors abroad are thriving without such handouts. The politics of wheat are heating up. In Washington, senators from agricultural states are warning that America cannot afford to lose its status as the world's breadbasket. They argue that food is not just an economic commodity, but a strategic asset, one that underpins U.S. influence globally. If countries no longer depend on America for their wheat, they argue, U.S. diplomatic leverage will shrink. And they are not wrong. For decades, American wheat was quietly a tool of soft power. Countries knew that aligning with Washington brought not just political benefits, but food security as well. Now, with Brazil stepping into that role, the balance of power is shifting. Globally, this shift has ripple effects. Russia, already a major wheat exporter, is seizing the moment to strengthen its own position, especially in markets where political alignment with the U.S. is weak. Argentina, though smaller in scale, is leveraging its seasonal advantage, harvesting at times of the year when others cannot, to grab niche contracts. Canada, another agricultural heavyweight, is also gaining ground, particularly in high-quality wheat for specialty milling. The result is a more fragmented, multipolar wheat market. No single country dominates, and buyers are spreading their risk across multiple suppliers. For them, this diversification is a win. For the U.S., it's a clear loss. The broader economic consequences are profound. Lower export revenues mean less foreign currency inflow, hurting America's trade balance. Farm equipment companies see declining sales as farmers cut back on investment. Rural economies dependent on agriculture face reduced spending, threatening jobs in small towns. Even universities and research institutions that depend on agricultural funding are feeling the squeeze. It's a cascading effect, where one rejected shipment ultimately ripples across multiple layers of the U.S. economy, and then there's the reputational cost. Once upon a time, Made in America carried a prestige in agriculture. Buyers associated U.S. wheat with quality, reliability, and efficiency. That brand is now tarnished. Buyers are no longer willing to pay a premium for American wheat. In fact, some are demanding discounts just to consider it. It's not that U.S. wheat has suddenly become inferior, but in global trade, perception is reality. And right now, the perception is negative. Looking forward, the question becomes, can the U.S. regain its position, or is this the beginning of permanent decline? The answer depends on how quickly Washington and the farming industry adapt. If they take decisive steps, investing in quality improvements, negotiating stable trade agreements, and avoiding weaponization of exports, there's a chance to recover. But if complacency continues, the decline will become irreversible. Brazil and others will not just take America's contracts, they will take America's role as a global agricultural leader. The closing lesson here is clear. No empire, whether political or agricultural, lasts forever if it fails to innovate and adapt. America built its wheat empire on the back of technology, scale, and global trust. But empires fall not because they are defeated outright, but because they fail to see the ground shifting beneath them. The ground is shifting now, in the literal soil of Brazil and the figurative soil of global trade. And if America doesn't act, wheat may just be the latest symbol of its fading dominance. So when we look at those headlines, U.S. wheat shipments rejected, Brazil lands $5 billion deals, it's not just a trade story, it's a story about power, pride, and the price of complacency. It's a story about how the tables can turn faster than anyone expects. And it's a warning, not just to farmers in Kansas, but to policymakers in Washington: adapt or be replaced. Because in the ruthless game of global trade, the world doesn't wait for those who fall behind.